Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the two-man game on Claves Online. I'm Bob Ramsey. That is my partner, Matt Rocchio. Rock, how are you today?
Doing great, Rammer. Doing great. How are you?
I am good. We're going to get to the NBA in a moment where stories keep raveling and unraveling and going all different directions. But despite the fact that every time we do a show, we think, okay, that's all the college basketball and St. Louis U news that we have, we've gone full circle with the best point guard maybe in the country, certainly if you gauge it by assists. Yuri Collins says, I'm coming back, pulls out of the transfer portal, comes back to St. Louis U, and the Billikens go from in the 40s in the preseason stuff right back to 25.
Yep, right to the top. Right back to where they were. The projections for potential Sweet 16. The conversations right back to where it was. Obviously, still three more scholarships left. The conversations we've had about a backup point guard and some other bigs and forwards hasn't changed, obviously, but you get to roll now with knowing what you have and having Yuri Collins in that group again, and that's obviously got to feel great. And then, we talked about also the creation of the Billiken Exchange, and then we got some more news about it being, kind of in the works for about a month, and there's the timing of the announcement just seemingly not being great, but it looks like logistically it may have been perfect timing in the end. So Yuri makes his decision. Obviously, I think those rankings we talked about before, those rankings I think are still justified, even with those question marks about the rest of the roster remaining.
Yeah, and to this point, everybody's mum on the exact timing and NIL money and all those sorts of things. But it appears that somebody or group of somebody's stepped up and were able to change the mind. Was there a hometown discount involved? Don't know. Probably could have been. We could rationalize that. We could say that's a legitimate opportunity. But you know, uh, going from a gut punch, no worse, a kick in the groin, to all of a sudden saying, really like our team. Um, the Billikens were a high scoring team last year. And if even if nothing else falls into the place the way they want it, I think this is going to be a very high scoring SLU basketball team next year.
Yeah, and I think really now you think Yuri comes back now, the roster's essentially full. You still, like I said, had those three scholarships. You're hoping really for a backup point guard and a backup big. But I mean, we didn't really get to break down, I think, the Javon Pickett one as much as we wanted, because there were still some other question marks hanging around with Nesbitt. But I mean, now when you look at the roster, this full look at it, it's just the offense is going to be insane. They have big-bodied guards everywhere. They have forwards all over the place. They got wings everywhere. I mean, it's just maybe not forwards. They got wings everywhere, and with the way
Yeah.
they can play a 5-out game right now, there's no reason they shouldn't again be one of the top scoring teams in the entire country. It's
Yeah.
going to be fun, obviously.
Yeah, let's call it worst case. You only have Francis Okoro, and so you're playing 4 out, and then when he's out, you play 5 out
Yeah.
and go go go.
It'll be interesting to see exactly how that looks, but I mean, there's going to be some move. I mean, just naturally with the way roster building works, there's going to be somebody. The question is, how much of a minutes load can they actually take while continuing to play the style that SLU's going to need them to.
Yeah,
That's why
the
that's why the Lucina Traore one transfer was so unfortunate, because
yeah,
it looked like he was going to slide right in, behind Francis. It was going to be a perfect split of minutes. They both played a similar style. You can play the same style around them in a lot of ways, and so that's why that one's still it's in the rear view mirror now, but that one's still so unfortunate.
yeah, and some kids just want to go somewhere else. Sometimes they just look at the situation and say, no, I want more minutes or whatever. And you know, 1,500 kids in the portal, and there's still a lot more movement to come.
Yep, and the portal giveth and the portal taketh away, as SLU has learned, as Tennessee has learned, and as pretty much every school in the country has learned, will learn, and if they haven't, will continue to learn.
And I predict this: there's not going to be. I just don't think there are going to be very many mid-major teams that are going to win a battle against a Power 5+ team or school. So I think the Billikens, and I know the fans know they're fortunate to get a player of Yuri's caliber back as the perfect piece to make the whole show run.
Yeah, and as you said in our last episode, it's not just about facilities anymore and coach salaries and things like that. There's a new dynamic to what money can affect in the game, and so have the have the kind of have things completely shifted in college sports. I'm not sure yet. Kevin Clark of The Ringer did a really good piece today when he's like, when Arizona starts, winning these battles, when Purdue starts winning these battles, then we can have a conversation about this seismic shift in the sports landscape. Like, yeah, the money's going to be shifting. That's going to be a seismic shift where the money's going. But is the actual results of who's dominating the sport and who's able to make runs in certain times, is that dynamic going to change wholly because of that shift? I'm not 100% sure, and obviously we haven't seen nearly enough to decide that.
And final thing, I'm making an official plea to billionaires all over America. Pick a non-football school and put your money behind them.
That would be
make
fascinating.
It a very deep level Division I.
That would be a fascinating move if we saw somebody do that. And obviously, there's some candidates. If you it's pretty easy right now. You put a bunch of money behind Gonzaga. They got a pretty good base. Why not? Why not? I mean, if you're making a chunk of money up in the Pacific Northwest, why not? They're going to win a lot, and you can make them win more. They were getting the number one overall guys, in Jalen Suggs was like fourth in the draft class, and Chet Holmgren was very famously number one, and they went to Gonzaga before the NIL. So why the hell not?
Why the heck not? Let's switch over to the pro side and take a look, first of all, of the series that everyone loved, feared, wondered about, saw coming like two trains colliding, did not go the way any of us thought in a Celtics 4-0 sweep of Brooklyn. Did not see that coming.
Yeah, I think we can safely say that there's not a single series in the first round that's going to go exactly how we saw, which is crazy because, leading up to the year, we kind of thought that would happen, at least in the Eastern Conference, and the fact that it's now happening across, and obviously injuries have played a part in some of those, and we'll talk about those, but like you said, maybe the most surprising, one the other way has been the Nets just not even showing up against the Celtics. And obviously you got to give a lot of credit to the Celtics. Jason Tatum stepping up on defense in a lot of these games. The entire Celtics defense stepping up and stymieing Kyrie Irving. Again, Jason Tatum doing an incredible job on Kevin Durant in the about 30 minutes of head-on-head action they played. I think he held him individually to 3 of 18 shooting.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, that's Kevin Durant. I don't care if you're Jason Tatum. I don't care who you are. That's Kevin Durant. That's pretty freaking unbelievable. And so what the Celtics have been doing, I've completely changed my mindset on them as a team. I was very vocal on them losing Robert Williams III being a potential, problem and them getting in a hole against the Nets. Obviously that didn't happen. They didn't lose a single game. And so if they can do this now and get Robert Williams III back healthy, this defense, it's the best defense in the league. Kevin Durant said that, and there's no reason for me to disagree.
And it is interesting. We've talked about it for decades in hockey, and maybe not as obvious or not a number one topic of conversation when you talk about the NBA, but when you look at the difference in the game, say from games just a couple of weeks ago to the way the game is played now, the playoffs are an absolutely different animal.
Yeah, it's just a completely different style of play, and I think one of the teams we talk about a lot is the Grizzlies, and I think they're learning that. That's another one of the series that we didn't think. That's a play-in, essentially a play-in team. I mean, they would have been a playoff team without the play-in tournament, but nonetheless, that's a play-in team that's not got them knotted up 2-2, 2-2, I should say, and that's something you wouldn't have expected going into that series, and I think the Grizzlies have talked about how they thought. Desmond Bain actually, talked about this, I think, in a post game. When he watched the playoffs, from the sidelines his first few years in the NBA, he saw a game that was, it was more physical, but it was also faster and more intense.
Yep.
And yet this first series against the Timberwolves has just been, gridlock because of the referees, and they've been, every time a player does anything, they're getting called. I mean, the lightest touches, the slightest, physical defense is they're getting rung up every single time. Both teams really, more so the Grizzlies early, and that's why Taylor Jenkins went scorched earth in the press conference like he did. But I mean, it's incredible the difference in these two styles of game, and how if you're a young player and you haven't experienced it, it's a shocking kind of thing to first really hit you.
First 3 minutes of the first quarter, all five starters for the Grizzlies had two fouls. And then just into the beginning of the second quarter, their sixth man had two fouls.
Yeah.
Something's going on here. Either the Grizzlies are the biggest set of thugs since Isaiah Thomas's Detroit Pistons, or we've got some sort of issue with the way the game is called.
Yeah, I would say there's an issue with the way that this game is being called right now. That's the bottom line. I mean, and Monty Williams came out, for the Suns in a different series, and he said, coaches shouldn't be afraid, that they're going to get their hands cut off for talking about the officiating if it's clearly bad. And I think he was speaking up, obviously, in the coaching fraternity for Taylor Jenkins a little bit there, and obviously he was feeling it himself too, because he wanted to be a little bit more demonstrative about his criticism of the fouls being called in that Suns Pelicans game. But nonetheless, the officiating's been bad in a lot of these games in a lot of ways, and that's a problem. These games are now on prime time. They're on ESPN. They're on TNT. People want to watch the ESPN broadcasts are readily available because it's ESPN. TNT has the best show built around the games, maybe on television, if not just sports television. So obviously people are going to watch that. And those guys are going to speak their mind, and they've been criticizing some boring, at times, gridlock games because of the bad officiating. The games haven't been boring; they've just been, ponderous in a way.
But part of the problem, I think it's incumbent upon us to be fair. The games get so physical.
Oh yeah.
I mean, really physical.
But I think that's what Desmond Bain was trying to say, is that he's like,
Yeah.
but they weren't called like this. There was
Right.
a physicality, but it was one where even the refs understood this is how the game's going to be. We have to let them play, or else it's going to be an unwatchable brand of basketball. Because that matters. I'm not saying don't call the rule book, but the style changes a little bit, and I think the whistles need to change a little bit too.
And the other key is officials got to work together.
Yep.
A certain bit of contact on one end has to be similarly called on the other end.
Yeah.
If the officials work together, it cleans a lot of that up.
Exactly. And moving on to some of these other series we talked about.
Yeah.
In a previous episode, a lot of the people predicted these were going to go 5 games. Well, it looked like one of the ones they could be right about was going to be the Miami Atlanta series. Well, Jimmy Butler's now out for Game 5, so now Atlanta might be able to force that one to a Game 5 as well. And it's just, again, they're not going to win that series, I don't think, but it changes the calculus. It makes you sweat a little bit more, and ask every other team right now. Ask the Philadelphia 76ers last night after getting, kind of their butts whooped at home by the Raptors to make that one 3-2 even though they're up. Ask Utah or ask Dallas. They're up 3-2 right now. They're feeling pretty good. You don't want to let those nerves start settling in. So it's going to be interesting to see here if the Hawks can get a win tonight, surprisingly, with Jimmy Butler out.
This is more of a macro look. And I promise it's not an old man, get off my lawn, look at things. Does it feel like to you that there are more man games missed today in the playoffs than there were in the past?
Yeah. I mean, Ben Simmons alone.
To what do we attribute that?
I think players have more willingness to say I'm not gonna risk my body for that. I think that's a huge thing. A lot of the contracts are fully guaranteed. I think in winning time they're talking about how am I going to get guaranteed this year my contract? I'm sure maybe there's an aspect of and heck in the show right now Spencer Haywood, the guy who said am I going to get guaranteed this year, or that was a different guy, but nonetheless it speaks to the fact that used to be a worry, and so now I wonder if maybe people are like, I'm going to prioritize my long-term career over something else. Then you have issues where I think, and I don't think this is a negative thing, I think it's just different times where the Nets are, while apparently, according to some reports, disappointed in his ultimate decision, the Nets have been open and respectful of Ben Simmons saying he's having a mental block right now, which is exacerbating or causing the pain in his back. That doesn't let him feel comfortable to play. And in fairness to him, if you don't feel comfortable and things are hurting you, that's probably going to lead you to get injured because you're not going to be moving around the way you should be. And that's things people have said before. And again, people can call BS on it as they want, but the fact of the matter is it's different, and now teams take that stuff into account. And I think just the way that they respect mental health, the way they respect overall long-term health. I mean, if you're a 7 or 8 seed, if you're the Hawks right now, you're not going to push Trae Young in this game, even with Jimmy Butler out. If he had his hamstring right now, you're a 7 seed,
No.
and the Hawks are even without Jimmy Butler in command, you're not going to push Trae Young right now. That's your franchise. And I just think those long-term aspects are maybe a little bit more thought about. I mean, there's no way. I mean, and yeah, player control and player freedom matters. Let's go. I keep talking about basketball shows or documentaries. In The Last Dance, Michael Jordan essentially made the Bulls so worried that he was going to be so pissed off about their lack of wanting to win that he was going to leave as soon as he could if they didn't let him play those playoff games even on restricted minutes. He let them know that. That's player freedom right there. And now, obviously, the fact that it's a more open league when it comes to player freedom,
Yeah.
you don't have to be Michael Jordan to have similar kind of leverage in a different kind of way. And so I wonder also if there's that kind of leverage in the other way, where the player's saying, listen, there's no way I'm coming out there with this hamstring pull right now and risking my season. Kind of in a different way, just like player control and player freedom.
Interesting. So tonight, Minnesota and Memphis. It's 2-2. Memphis, as you already pointed out, very frustrated with how their game was called. And I was talking to some of their broadcasters earlier today, this team's got to try and find the balance, and Ja Morant in particular, not a criticism, but finding the balance of attacking the rim and keeping the ball moving, not dribbling, but passing. Finding that appropriate balance to face Minnesota tonight.
Yeah, I wonder if the idea that he's got to step up in the playoffs maybe got to his head a little bit more, and he's like you said, he's taking the ball to the rack a little bit too much when he needs to be moving the ball, getting it to his shooters. He has Dylan Brooks back. Get it to your wings that can play the game. I wonder also if part of that, especially this last game, was Jaren Jackson Jr. obviously picking up some fouls early and having a very, very off game, and apparently they've talked to him about that, and the team's feeling better about his performance going forward. So I think that's Ja putting too much on his shoulders, and I think what we've seen from him and what we've seen from this coaching staff and this team, we'll see that better tonight. The question, though, is if he falls back into it then in a Game 6.
Yeah, I like Memphis tonight, though.
Yeah, I think so. Home, they really want. The fans are really going to want to dance to Whoop That Trick. So yeah, I think that's going to be a win for them at home. The other big home game that is a question, obviously, the big injury to Devin Booker has now completely changed that Pelicans and Suns series. One that we thought might be a sweep, if not a 5-game series in the Suns' favor. Obviously, a team that we many times agreed was the best team in the league. Well, you lose a potential MVP candidate, and now it's 2-2. You're back at home. Brandon Ingram is destroying you in ways that you didn't expect, and Chris Paul's having trouble with Jose Alvarado, who picked his pocket a couple times, including the one time on the inbounds pass, which he's becoming kind of famous for. It's completely turned on its head. We got a series now in Phoenix and in New Orleans, respectively.
Yeah, so with the Booker thing and with him out, anytime your point guard leaves the floor now, you've got real problems. I mean, real problems. And how many minutes can Chris Paul play?
Yeah, I always thought, with problems of Cameron Payne not playing like he did last year, and Landry Shamet just, not being good enough to be a high-minute player on a championship team, I should say. I always thought the question was going to be, if Chris Paul broke down, would those guys be able to play good enough in his stead? And now, without Devin Booker. The question is, can they augment Chris Paul in a meaningful way in playoff time? This is the difference you were just talking about the playoffs in the regular season. The Suns could still win games when either Paul or Booker was hurt in the regular season. But this ain't no damn regular season, and they cannot win games right now with the way that Paul and the rest of that small guard group is playing. And Mikal Bridges needs to step up. They need to figure out their defensive scheme again and make sure that Brandon Ingram isn't getting isolated on other players. Mikal Bridges has to step up tonight and absolutely shut down Brandon Ingram. Because if he doesn't and Ingram has another big game, they could potentially be looking at going back to New Orleans leading this series, and that's something we never thought we were going to say.
No, when you take a look at all three games tonight, we already mentioned, even though it's a 3-1 lead, Jimmy Butler's out. Atlanta, we could see them clearly winning a road game, still being down a game. We both think Memphis will win, but that's an even series. Minnesota could take the lead there. New Orleans clearly could win tonight. And, all these series are they're not going according to the script.
Yeah, and again, last night, Toronto, that one potentially, again, they're still, it's not out of their hands yet in Philadelphia. They're still leading going back to Toronto, but that is the exact situation that the Grizzlies and the Suns are looking at. Being up three, they'd be being down 3-2 going back, so it's actually even worse for those teams potentially tonight. But they're up 3-2. They're going to Toronto. Doc Rivers has been poor in his closeout games over his career, but he's 7-13 in closeout games in his career, and I think he's lost his last 4 or 5 straight of closeout games. So that's been bad. You got to be worried right now if you're a Sixers fan, because it's not working right now. Harden's not playing well enough. Embiid can't do it all alone. And the Raptors have started to figure out that defensive scheme that I thought they would come out with from the get-go. And now we're starting to see, as soon as they can figure out, listen, we'll let Embiid beat us in certain ways, but as long as we can use the length of this lineup to continually frustrate every other avenue, we can slowly but surely win these games.
Quick brief look at the 2 games tomorrow, because they'll play before we reconvene on 2-man game. Milwaukee's going to close it out tomorrow.
Yeah, that one I think does go the predicted 5. There's no reason it shouldn't. Milwaukee's closing that one out. Yeah, they're at home. They've been they beat the Bulls just to death in the United Center. Yeah, that's Milwaukee.
And I think it's going to be fun to watch. I don't think Denver has a chance.
I hope so, because their games are fun to watch.
They are.
Right before you go to bed, but it's just it's a wrap right now. The Warriors have another lineup of death, and that's what won them championships back in the day. Draymond Green's back to be Defensive Player of the Year. Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson. We talked about the Splash Brothers in the pool. It's insane what they've got going again. At this point, until Booker comes back, the Warriors are back to the favorite in the West. It's insanity. It's absolute insanity.
It is amazing how that flipped, because truly, all year long, there was no question, as you mentioned a minute ago.
Yeah.
No question Phoenix was the best team.
Yeah, maybe about a month into the
players out, it's up for grabs.
Maybe about 3 weeks into the season, when Steph came out scorching hot, we're like, maybe the Warriors can do this as they can hold on till Klay. But then Klay gets back, Steph gets hurt, and it was clear they just didn't and Klay wasn't looking great, that they weren't going to be that level. And then, of course, everyone somehow came back healthy at exactly the right time, and now they're the Atomic Warriors again, and it's going to get really annoying for a large chunk of NBA fans if that team gets on, stays hot like they look like now.
Before we break away, any threads through these games that you're seeing other than bad officiating that we should keep an eye on? Is it the fact that the league in postseason really commits to defense, certainly on the main scorers?
Yeah, it's the defense on these players is insane. Jason Tatum doing what he did to Kevin Durant, Marcus Smart doing what he did to Kyrie Irving. That game alone, like I said, what the Raptors have done when that first game, when they realized if they throw too many bodies at Embiid, they're not long enough to continually cover every other outlet if they let him space it. But now they're blitzing they're blitzing pick and rolls. They're getting out in the passing lanes more. They're letting Embiid do what he wants to do against one guy, maybe showing help at different times, and they're letting the bad shooters on the Sixers try to beat them. Matisse Thybulle last night went 1 for 6 The one he made was a rim out that was accidentally goaltended back in. So he went 0 for 6. And so they forced the 3-point shots into the less good shooters on the 76ers. I mean, what the Warriors have been able to do to everybody else but Jokic. I mean, Draymond admits that a couple quarters Jokic has beat him up and won the matchup. But in crucial times, Draymond Green's been able to get a tip pass or a steal that's completely changed the game, and no one else on Denver's doing anything other than Jokic, and you have to watch the other players around Draymond and the way he directs traffic. We've talked about it before. It's so incredible. Every team right now is playing a different brand of defense than we saw. The only difference, the Suns' defense is markedly worse than it was in the regular season, and I can't figure it out.
And finally, so far in the playoffs, the best defensive play has been the security guard taking down the lady who trespassed on the court. That was textbook. Anticipated the issue, anticipated where the pass was going, jumped into the passing lane. I mean, that is the defensive play of the playoffs.
He was eyeing that. I mean, he was eyeing her the entire time. And yeah, I mean, the quick twitch muscle on the security guard was extremely impressive. I mean, and at the same time, whoever's funding these protesters, I feel like there's a better way to get your message out than dropping, like $12,000 on courtside seats and then not letting us actually know what your message is because the securities gets rid of it really fast. Like we all know it's about Glenn Taylor and his chicken farms. I guess we did get that message, but like that we got that message after protest number 1. And a lot of people Googled it and were like, oh, he killed 1 million chickens because they had bird flu, and that could potentially jump to the human population and be deadly. And wouldn't that be a horrible thing? So I mean, again, factory farming is bad.
Let nature take its course. Let nature take its course, good or bad.
Factory farming is bad. I understand that, but maybe there's some situations where we say, listen.
Maybe we can fix this.
This industry's doing horrible things right now we have a problem with. We'll come back in 2 months when stopping them wouldn't potentially put a lot of humans at risk.
And I don't denigrate the passion. I don't.
No, we love passion here in the two-man game.
But functionally, as you pointed out, the courtside seats, the dressing up like a ref.
That's funny. That I actually did like that. That's how you get the screen. That's how you get the headline. That's a smart move. That's a cheap way to get the headline. That's smart. That's smart.
But getting the seats, isn't it it's not like when I was young in the 70s and the United Farm Workers protested working conditions. It's kind of a first world protest.
Also, at the same time,
what I mean?
I do want to say, do not. I hope, you know what, if this is what these people are going to use the money for, that's fine, because I honestly don't want them to use it for more nefarious activities, because how do you get a chain into the arena in the first place? I don't know how they got a chain in. That's a weapon. I don't know how this happened. I don't know if they stole it off something there that they saw. How do you get a chain into the arena? So therefore, keep protesting. The security guards are doing great. I do not want these people to use their money for go full Bane on Gotham City.
Yeah, what's the next thing they're going to do? Let the air out of a Mercedes tires? I mean, it's first world protesting.
It is kind of first world.
Rest.
Yeah,
you're going to give it a rest. So will we.
There you go.
And so after a couple of more days of playoffs, we're going to know what's going to be happening almost at every series. So in a couple of days, we'll get back together and figure it all out.
I think we're going to see at least 3 series go to Game 7, and that's going to be fun.
That will be fun. Always fun talking to Matt Rocchio. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you,
I'm Bob Ramsey. It's the two-man game on Claibs Online. We'll see you next time.
At St. Louis Acura, we have over 330 pre-owned vehicles of all makes and models. And all of them are covered by our St. Louis Acura Promise and backed by our Better Business Bureau A+ rating and 30 years in business. We also service all makes and models of vehicles, including glass and bumper repair, paint touch-ups, and full mechanical services from one of our 24 technicians. St. Louis Acura, better than ever for you, no matter what vehicle drives you.